technical standpoint. But it occurred to me from a dream that I had where astrology as my mother appeared to me, that there's something else that goes on that's basically hiding in plain sight, but it's important, and it's something that's worthwhile for anybody who's doing astrology to recognize and to be involved with, because there's a profound transformation that takes place in our consciousness when we do astrology. And if we recognize these gifts that come from the great mother of us all, astrology, embrace them and apply them, then bit by bit, our whole evolution speeds up, our consciousness changes. So what are these 5 gifts? We'll get to that in just a minute. Just wanted to say, if you look around, you notice that the world that we live in right now is vastly different than the world that we were born into. Even if you're quite young, this is a truth. And we have to adjust all the time. And Ashwin, who's significantly younger than me, has been coaching me on how to present things online, for instance, which is something that I didn't know. When I first started doing astrology, I calculated all of my astrology charts by hand. The first chart I calculated, I think, took maybe 12 hours. I got so that I could calculate a chart in about 15 minutes because I was doing so many of them. My first hand calculator only added, subtracted, and divided, and it cost $100. And you do the math back, like 40 years ago or so, that was massive. So the world that we live in now is changed. In the early days, in the 70s, I met Rob Hand, Robert Zoller, and Robert Smith, the 3 Roberts. They started a company called Project Hindsight. I was personal friends with all of them, and of course, Rob Hand and I are still close. They translated all of these manuscripts from Latin and Greek and Arabic that had never been translated by astrologers. These were astrological manuscripts that were now being translated by astrologers. So we saw, slowly, and then boom, an explosion of all kinds of new fields of interest within astrology. Hellenistic astrology, medieval astrology, all kinds of cross-pollinizations took place between various schools of Vedic astrology as well as various schools of Western astrology. And the information explosion that's happened in every field all over the world has had profound effects on the field of astrology. Now, that having been said, it's really important to see that beyond all of the technical stuff that we're able to do with computers and long distance with our clients and stuff, I used to have a local practice in 6 cities and saw my clients in New York and San Diego, Omaha, Seattle. I was on the road all the time because it wasn't really so easy to do appointments over the telephone, or there was no Skype or Zoom or any of the things that we have now. And what I'm saying, so the field has vastly changed, and it is very easy for us to get lost in the minutia and all the technical stuff and forget these 5 gifts. Now, what happened to me I've been doing astrology for just a few years, and I had a dream one night. I was walking in a snowstorm, and my mother was holding my hand. She was poor, dressed in rags, and she uh, didn't have a place for us to get out of the snowstorm, and didn't have any food for us to eat. But I felt very strongly her love and concern. And I looked up, and she was astrology. And I realized that this was not just my life, my spiritual path, my livelihood, but that there was something that I had to do for her. And I spent 25 years of my life working to build an organization, OPA, the Organization for Professional Astrology. And then I was relieved of all of the responsibilities for that. And I got back to looking not what could I do for astrology, but what astrology had been doing for me, what gifts my great mother astrology had been giving, and gives all of us. They're right in plain sight. So what are these 5 gifts? Tolerance, timing, one universal structure, self-understanding, and a spiritual path. Now I'm going to go through these 5 gifts twice. I'll go through them once in a more general way, and then if we have time, I'll go back through them in a technical fashion and describe some of the backdrop of what goes on with the general concepts. So what is tolerance? And tolerance is the antidote for anger or hatred or arrogance, negative ingredients in our personality that we would all like perhaps to overcome. So how does astrology help us become more tolerant? Well, as the expression goes, as plain as the nose on your face. You start studying astrology and you realize everybody has a different chart. And if astrology has meaning, that there's something in the sky that from moment to moment reflects something on the earth, and that the birth chart has some validity, then why would everybody be the same? Meaning, why would everybody be just like me? And when I'm arguing with somebody, I'm in some kind of brawl with a fellow human being. Astrology has already told us that there is a reason why this person does what they do. And we learn tolerance bit by bit if we wish to embrace it. But I make the point right at the beginning that tolerance is there, that we are supposed to be tolerant. Astrology is showing us that people have different functions, they have different purposes, they have a different history, they have different life experiences. You know, the book Stephen Covey wrote, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Fifth point that he makes in that book is that we should seek to understand and then to be understood. And there is that old axiom that the French have: to understand all is to forgive all. J. Krishnamurti had said, well, when you understand all, you transform it. And something gets transformed in us when we come to a real understanding of somebody else's life situation. I came to a conclusion a long time ago that I wasn't going to see any clients that I didn't feel love for. If I couldn't reach that place inside of myself where I'd come to terms with what this person was about, and feel a love for them, I didn't take them on as a client because it would be a waste of their time, energy, and money, and it'd be suffering for both of us. So tolerance is this first gift. That doesn't, and I hasten to add, after 45 years of doing astrology professionally, that doesn't mean that I've drank so deeply from the cup of tolerance that I don't lose my temper, that I don't feel intolerant of other people. But the point is, when those things come up in me, I don't pat myself on the back for them. I see them as a mistake. It's something that I should overcome. And that is the beginning of the gift, is learning to embrace this whole principle of tolerance, get it deep enough inside of us that we are able to move forward with it, that we're able to do something empowering. Now, I can say that for my students and people who have come to me for appointments, all of my clients and such, they get some of that. They are able to move beyond the arrogance and the pettiness of thinking that it's, here's one path to truth, it's the only way, and that I am inspired to have the key to it, and anybody who disagrees with me is just nuts. Which it's kind of depressing when I hear astrologers talk that way. And luckily, we live in an age where that is less common. When I first entered the field, astrologers used to butt heads over everything. I had people argue over what zodiac to use or what house system to use or why you should use the asteroids or trans-Neptunian planets and all of the other things that astrologers get into dispute about. But the thing is that is not so much the case now, and there's a reason for that. How deep into the weeds we want to get with this, I don't know. But we can start with, we all agree that we're in an interesting time period. Things are changing very rapidly. And you start by recognizing that when you go to a foreign country now, I spend time every year in India and have since 1976. When I first started going to India in 76, there were hardly any automobiles. Things were at a little bit more basic level. Now, American companies hire on average 180,000 graduating engineers from India every year. And there's great cross-pollination between our cultures. In 1981, I moved to the city of Naples, Florida. There was one yoga instructor in the town when I moved here. Now there's hundreds of yoga instructors. I started doing yoga when I was a little kid. My parents were both Christian ministers, and I grew up in the heartland. There wasn't any yoga schools or anything, but it was a past life memory. And I've met so many people in and out of the astrological community who were obviously living in the East in their last or many past incarnations. And I meet often people from India that have more Western souls. They have an energy and a way of going about life that is more industrious than you would expect in a traditional Indian culture. And of course, the same would be true for Japan and China, which I know less about. But I'm saying my brief encounters with people from Thailand and Malaysia and such has shown that they've had an infusion of souls from the West. And we obviously in the West have had an infusion of souls from the East. So we're moving into a time period where we're going into one universal world culture, and different ingredients from our nations and our um, um, races, our religions are blending together. We're coming out to some higher understanding. And this, I assure you, astrology has a role to play in helping people embrace the tolerance that should be an automatic byproduct of this blending together of world cultures. So we'll set that aside for a moment. About timing. Uh, you know, astrology is all about finding the right time and reading the significance of each moment of time. And so if we are able to imbibe that completely, if we're able to get the meaning of what each moment in time has to offer us, we can position ourselves. You know, a baseball player has to have good timing when they're out in center field and the ball is hit. They have to run with their mitt open and be at the right place to catch the baseball. A dancer has to have good timing in order to perform their moves correctly. We can all see how timing can be such an important feature. You know, one company comes out with a hula hoop in 1 year and makes a fortune. Somebody else comes out with the same gadget in another year and they go bankrupt. So being able to be at the right place at the right time, we can all agree that that's an important factor. But what does astrology have to offer with that? Well, how many times do our clients come to us and ask us, oh, what would be a good day for my girlfriend and I to get married? Or I need to ask my boss for a raise. Can you choose the best time for me to approach him? I'm wanting to apply for a new job. I want to go to Bermuda for a vacation. Can you choose the best time to take off, to go there? And the truth of the matter is, and I've experimented with this my whole career, I've intentionally started an activity at an inappropriate time just to see what would happen. And, you know, true to form, and it's not, I promise you, a self-certifying prophecy. But when I've started things at a bad moment, things don't come about. I wrote a computer chart interpretation program called Entra back at the tail end of the 80s. And the reason was I didn't have a computer program printout to give my clients that would have all the analytic information in their chart. And, you know, an interpretation of what does it mean to have Jupiter in the ninth house conjunct the midheaven. So I sat down and wrote one from scratch, not just the text, but all the computer code. And the person who developed the language that this program was written in, David Cochran, runs a company called Cosmic Patterns, and he still sells my program, Indra, today. Was on my radar because I was having a problem. I had a bug in the program and I couldn't get it to work out. And I was all ready to launch this, but I had to get this one thing straight. So I called David up. It was the day before Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving's always been an important holiday for me. I started doing astrology on Thanksgiving. So here we're coming up to another Thanksgiving, 1988, I believe. And I got David on the telephone. No, it was 87. Okay. So I said, can I just come and live with you until we get this, sound? And he says, sure. So I'm at the airport and I get to the ticket counter and my flight had been canceled. So this is before cell phones. I went to the payphone and I called David and I said, hey, the gods are conspiring against us. I can't get there. And David said, no, the gods are conspiring with us. We just have to understand what it is that's being said. And so it was many months before this came out, before my program was released, but it was released at the right time. And I've received royalties from it since 1989. I don't know how many years, 88, 89, long time. So anyhow, my point is that becoming proficient at timing is an important gift that astrology gives. And becoming what we might call good at astrology doesn't automatically confer on you the gift of timing in its full-blown fashion. Just like tolerance, it comes in stages. The gift is given, but it isn't something that you can drink and then have it wholeheartedly. It comes stages, bit by bit. Let me see, what year was that? In 1978. I was woken up in the middle of the night by my spiritual master and told to come to India immediately. I was deep in debt. I had no money. I had a passport, but no visa. And 24 hours later, I was in India. And I got through customs without a visa, the whole bit. Long story. But my point is, that very year, I had 5 of the best astrologers in the United States at the time read my astrology chart. Not a single one of them predicted this trip to India. And I didn't see it. I kept going to different astrologers because I had a feeling that something was coming that I couldn't see. And being a good astrologer consults other astrologers anyway. It goes with the territory. But I went to India with nothing but my passport, a copy of Meher Baba's discourses, a change of clothes, and my astrology chart, because I wanted to see what I could see. I had an innate faith, which of course we all do, that it's all there. If we have eyes to see it, we can catch it. Now, I won't get lost in the weeds with you on this, but I will mention spiritual master and foreign countries are the 9th house. And I have Uranus at 0 degrees of Cancer. My sun is at 1 degree of Libra, so they're square natally. When this trip came about, my progressed sun was exactly square my natal Uranus, which was on, Uranus sits on the midnight side of the 9th house. 4 degrees Cancer is the cusp of the 9th house. So this movement was clearly shown in my chart, but the progressed sun was in the 12th house. So it didn't appear to anybody. It wasn't something that they saw instantaneously, even with study and the fact that we were on an appointment and they were working for me and all of that. And I didn't see it, but nonetheless it was there. So what good is it if we can't see it before it happens? Well, most of the time we do. That's why we make a living as astrologers, not just because We can do an electional chart and choose a good time for somebody to do something, and then it works out. Because we can see things into their past and into their future that are helpful and healthy. A prediction and getting the timing right to the whole universe isn't the issue. It isn't the thing that's going to move us forward as a career or as individuals on our own path in life. I've been married 3 times. Would it have been helpful for me to know that I was going to be married 3 times when I was entering my first marriage? I don't think so. I mean, psychologically, you want to enter a marriage with your whole heart and believing that this is forever, for keeps. So knowledge, while is everywhere, what information we gather and fashion into knowledge has to be based on what we honestly believe is healthy and helpful. Anyway, so we all can agree that timing is an important ingredient in the life of an astrologer. Astrology has something to say about timing. And by the way, I make mistakes all the time, but I'm right more than I'm wrong on the timing things. That's why people keep coming back and seeing me. And I've had some clients for more than 40 years. When I make a mistake, sometimes it's a doozy, but by and large, I'm on the right track and I get it correct. And I believe that that is the case for most astrologers most of the time. Otherwise, you wouldn't earn a living at it. Okay, so what about the third gift of astrology? One universal structure. To have one frame of reference that answers all of the questions, that interprets every item of internal and external experience, is a godsend. Now, people who are religious or spiritually inclined have a frame of reference sometimes that answers every question for them, becomes an article of faith. And people who drink deeply from the well of science often carry it as an article of faith as well. So what are the shortcomings? Do you know, in 1892 there was a World Congress of Religion at the World's Fair in Chicago, and by divine will and happenstance, Swami Vivekananda ended up, just as a youth, as a young kid, as the keynote speaker. It's fascinating how it happened, but the point is that he stood up in front of these people from all these different, like Episcopalians and Methodists and Catholics and Sikhs and Jains, Hindus, Muslims, all of these various world religions in one place. And of course, it wasn't recorded, but his giving out of the keynote address got a standing ovation that, according to the reports, lasted for more than 10 minutes. And he just quoted from the Bhagavad Gita, basically, with a simple message: all rivers are going to the ocean. There's many paths up the mountain, but only one mountain. And it was something that touched people. And he was the chief, Ramakrishna's chief disciple, Vivekananda, was sent to the United States for this purpose. Anyhow, my point is that there is something that unifies everything. Astrology is a mental discipline. Now, we have a mind, we have emotions, we have a physical body, and the rishis of old understood that you could use your mental body, your emotional body, or your physical body as a primary focus for the journey to God. We have karma yoga, which is using the physical body, a life of service. We have bhakti yoga, which is the yoga of love. And we have jnana yoga, which is the path of the mind, the mental yoga. And if you read the Bhagavad Gita, there's also a subdivision of that, which is meditation, which is part of dhyana yoga. But astrology is the path of knowledge. Astrology is the yoga of knowledge. We suffer because astrology is infinite, but we don't experience our mind as being infinite. So we, as the proverbial blind men grabbing a hold of a piece of the elephant, get a picture of astrology by virtue of the part that we've grabbed a hold of. But let's lump it all together for 1 minute and look at what astrology offers as one universal discipline. Astrology is the only discipline as a universal structure that can describe every item of our experience, both inside of ourselves as well as in our environment, with one set of symbols. Astrology links the internal and the external. Jupiter may be your sense of optimism, but he still makes it rain. It's an external thing, but it's also something inside of us, one symbol. The sun shines, gives us sunburn, grows our crops, but it also is our ego. It's the formation of the small, limited self. It's our sense of personal identity at that level. So what I'm saying is that astrology links all of these various things together. And it's the one system that does it all with one set of tools. Now, astrologers go off in this direction and that direction. I had a friend who's since passed away, who's a very good weather predictor. She used astrology for that. I was at a conference with at a weekend workshop with Gary Kristen in Tampa. He had come down from the New England area and was giving this workshop on Uranian astrology, and I was studying with him at the time. David Beasley, a close friend of mine who lives there as a professional astrologer, came and jumped. There was a big hurricane coming through, and I ran to jump in my car because I was under the orders to be at my place of residence if a natural disaster struck. So I was off, and David came out. He had a map of the state of Florida, and he was pointing to it, and he's saying, look at, I laid the planets out on this map. The storm is going to go just south of you. It'll be a direct hit on Marco Island, but it won't hit Naples. Well, he was saying something that nobody else was saying, but he was doing it with astrology, and he was exactly right. That's exactly what happened. So what I'm saying is that whether you use astrology for medical diagnosis or weather prediction or personality inventory or whatever else, Henry Weingarten runs the astrology fund on Wall Street, makes money buying and selling stocks and bonds and other securities. And, you know, I was studying with him years ago, and I was in his office, and he wrote some numbers down on a piece of paper and said, stick this in your pocket. I said, okay. And then lessons were going on, and we were talking about things. And then the bell went off, meaning the stock market was closing. And so the numbers went across the screen. Here are the numbers that the stock market closed at. He says, look at the piece of paper in your pocket. He had written down, you know, an hour before the exact numbers that the stock market would close at. He's a very good financial astrologer. And of course, Grace Morris is a financial astrologer. And you know, there's, you know, so many out there, Ray Merriman, stuff, and all of whom I know very well, and I know their work is very competent. So what I'm saying is that there's a tremendous amount that can be done with this small set of tools that we have in astrology. But astrology has a different view of time than the normal scientific methodology, which for repeatability, every moment in time has to be treated as the same. And as astrologers, we know every moment in time is unique. Astrology allows us to evaluate things. You know, a scientist looking at a painting by Picasso, and you ask him what's it worth, he will, as a scientist, reduce it to the amount of paint and canvas and say, oh, it's $12.95. But to an art critic, looking at it from a different frame of reference, it could be invaluable, $40 million or whatever. My point is that astrology not only measures quantity, but quality. So anyway, I'm trying to make the point that this one universal structure that astrology gives us is great. We utilize it. Every indigenous culture has some form of astrology, and it is the single mental connecting thread between all cultures. Now we're coming into this time of all the world cultures coming together. What role do you think astrologers are going to play in that? Well, hopefully one that could be very healing, could be very instrumental in helping people be more tolerant, gaining a greater sense of timing. See, timing is really being able to tune into the cosmos and see what is the purpose of this moment in time. Every moment in time is good for something, like it says in the Bible. There's a time to sow, a time to plant, a time for rejoicing, a time for grief, and so on. But my point is, astrology gives us this, and for us to embrace it through this gift that we've been given and to understand its true importance. We can't give it to other people unless we understand its real value. Now, how about self-understanding? Well, I'm sure all of you have had the experience of going to an astrologer for the first time and realizing, hey, this guy knows more about me than I know about me. Isn't that cool? Oh my God. You know, my first astrology session with Swami Kriyananda. He knew so many things out of my past and so many things that were inherent in my personality, and some things that I frankly would have preferred to ignore. But he pointed them out to me. And he had all of the stuff right. And he said to me, you'll become a professional astrologer. And I thought, he's right about so much, but I was never going to become an astrologer. That, to me, was insane. Astrologers were those people that walked around with 50 books in their arms and, you know, or calculating all kinds of stuff. But that's not my forte. And then a few years later, of course, bingo. But my point is that we learn in astrology, first of all, what I call pin the tail on the donkey. You look something up. Oh, I have Mars in Taurus. Now that means that, like I'm covetous of my material possessions, or I want to gather things. And we read these things in books, and oh, I have uh, Venus in Gemini. That means I'm attracted to two different types of women. It's like I have the moon in the sixth house. That means that, I can get stuck in repetitive habits or whatever. But the point is you start getting all of these things and you're just, yep, that. There comes a later stage where there's a synthesis starts happening. And I call that a paint by numbers period, where you go to a larger level and you start getting something that looks like a painting, but it's not great art. Because you realize everything in the chart modifies the functioning of everything else. They create the context that's created by the whole manufactures a set of instructions for the functioning of each one of the particular planetary bodies. So then there gets to be that magic moment. Aha, I am unique. And you realize that there's nobody in the universe that's just like you. And that coming to self-understanding through astrology takes a gigantic leap. But you reach an end point where you realize, where did I come from? Where am I going? It's like, you mean all of this is because of the time I was born? Huh. Well, the father of Western modern astrology, Alan Leo, had a successful practice in England. He went to India and he came back and he wrote in the introduction to one of his final works, Esoteric Astrology. He says, I've come to the conclusion that the entire value of natal astrology rises or falls based on the acceptance of karma and reincarnation. Without those two principles, the whole edifice falls. Well, he took astrology, which had been standing on its head, and turned it right side up. Now, you're not the way you are because of when you were born. You were born at the time and place you were born at because of how you are. These are the things that the cosmos has set up to materialize your karma for the lifetime. All of this is a long conversation, but the fifth point here is astrology gives us a spiritual path. So once we recognize that the whither and whence, that we came from somewhere and we're going somewhere, we either end up in some kind of macabre picture of Nietzschean eternal return, where we just keep repeating the same things over and over again, or we recognize that the universe is actually teleological, that there is a learning that goes on. Just like you're not the same person that you were when you were born. You won't be the same person in your next lifetime that you were in this one. And that there is something that gets built up that you carry on with you from one lifetime to the next, leading up to the time that you take that great turn inward and enter the spiritual path, where you journey back to the Creator, where you journey back to oneness, to wholeness, to God. So this is where science, religion, astrology all start to merge. Art and science come together. There's a great synthesis, and that turning inward we call the spiritual path. And as Dag Hammarskjöld said in his book Markings, the longest journey is the road leading inward. So what do we do with this? How can we use astrology? Well, again, to get into the details would take hours and hours, and I do this as a weekend workshop, 5 Gifts of Astrology. But Suffice to say, uh, things that are easy are things that you've learned in the past incarnations and show up as talents, trines and sextiles, good placements, and so on in your chart. And things that you've been remiss on or have been struggling with show up as poor placements, afflictions, and so on. And astrology not just shows you what the problems is, like, hey, you got a club foot, it shows you what to do with it, how to start unscrambling it, how to accept our weaknesses, and how to develop a strategy for working our way out from under these various things that hold us back. You can't solve something until you recognize that you have a problem. And astrology shows you in spades what the problems are if you are conscious and choose to look. So you have the chart. That was my 5-minute alarm going off. I broke my watch yesterday, so I have to use my alarm here. Anyhow, my point is, astrology shows us the way out. It gives us a spiritual path, can be, the center highway itself, or it can just be a convenient adjunct to the spiritual path. I've taken it as my path because it was given to me by my master as my path. But when I was in India, I went to visit the ashram of the perfect master, Upasani Maharaj, and I saw that there was a little temple built to Saturn there, and people came to do rituals and things to unravel the karma having to do with our very helpful friend, the Lord of Karma, Saturn. Anyway, I don't know exactly how this works online. As I say, this is the first time I've done a talk where there weren't people in the room with me. But if anybody has any questions or they want to pose some questions to me, I'm happy to take them. I don't even know how that works. But I wanted to say in summation, if I can find a summating point here, let me read this to you. These 5 gifts of astrology reveal a way out of our dilemma. Tolerance, seeing the world as a reflection of our inner struggle. Consequently, everybody that comes into your life is shown somewhere in your chart. They represent something that's in you. So good and bad, we learn to become more tolerant, to become more loving, kinder, more eventually compassionate, which leads us to timing, which brings us into the will of the cosmos. Timing is a way of cooling our mind and helping us to plan our next step, to see what is appropriate from where we are to where we have to go next. One universal structure. Embracing our place in the cosmos, we understand the rhythm of how fulfillment comes within this universal structure, seeing where we're placed, what our mission is about, what our role in life is about. Self-understanding. Astrology, as I've been saying, gives us a rigorous form of self-analysis if we choose to take it up. We can't always see the center of the circle when we're standing on it. So that's why it's helpful, and I tell all of my students, at least once a year, have some other astrologer look at your chart so that you get on the other side of the desk and get information from a different source. The spiritual path, and finally, We find the path through seeing what progress is necessary. Through the logic of experience, we are led to the path of realization. Astrology helps us plan what our next step has to be at any step of the equation. My spiritual master, Meher Baba, said, astrology is the perfect science, but out of 1 million astrologers, one understands it. And one other thing he said is astrology has to be interpreted in the frame of reference of the society that it arises in. That one has taken me some time to unravel, years. But I took it, even though I've studied a number of different derivative systems of astrology, I'm pretty much a meat and potatoes guy. I'm actually a vegan, but right down the center of the road, Western astrologer. I have great regard for Vedic astrologers. I have friends, Western and Eastern friends, who are Vedic astrologers. I have friends in almost every system of astrology that I can think of. I'm friends with the center of the Mahabhota system, which is a Burmese astrology. There's all kinds of stuff there at the technical level. But these 5 gifts are not just psychological and philosophical, but they're spiritual principles that are freely given. And if we imbibe them, their path of operation on our soul is much quicker. So I thank you for your indulgence, for your time. And if we meet again and we go into this further, so be it. I have a website, theastrologycompany.com. I have a monthly newsletter that is free, and many other services if you wish to look into it further. So namaste. Thank you very much.
Thank you. This is what I probably want to hear in New Delhi. So I think, you said that you have done workshops on this topic. So, which means
Sure.
even this 1 hour is probably a lot of cutting short and stuff that has gone in.
When I did this talk at UAC, the United Astrology Conference, what was it, a year ago in Chicago? Mm-hmm. There was maybe 2,000 astrologers from all over the world there. And my talk was 75 minutes. And even that was very, very truncated.
Okay.
National Council for Geocosmic Research had me do a 1-day workshop for them on this topic. And that was better. But for my own students, I do it for 3 days.
Okay. Okay. So, you can just go on and talk on this thing. So, okay. I think that brings us towards the end, and the next lecture is Eduardo Gramaglia's. It's a pre-recorded lecture, and that was also one of the finest lectures that I've heard, and I'm sure people will surely like it. Even I have to watch it 1 or 2 more times because a lot of historical stuff is already there, and I love history. So,
me too.
Okay, so I'm sure you'll also like it. So thank you so much for doing this amazing lecture, and I just hope someday I'll visit the workshop that you do on this. So yeah.
While we're here, I just wanted to tell you.
Sure.
The conference that you're speaking at in Chennai next year?
No, it's in Kolkata.
And Calcutta.
Yeah.
Yes, right.
Yes.
They asked me to speak there too.
Brilliant.
So I will probably see you there.
Oh, that's excellent. So we'll meet again. That's a good thing.
Okay, you take care. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you so much for joining today. Thanks everyone for joining. We'll see you tomorrow.